Robin Ayoub from the Localization Fireside chat, and welcome to another episode. Today, I'm recording episode 171 on the channel, and I hope everybody's enjoying their Thursday morning, February the 5th today. Where does the time fly? It seems like 2026, January's finished. Now we're on to February. Time's flying when you're having a good time. I hope it is. And I hope still everybody, we're expecting some snow here where I am in Toronto, and I hope everybody keeping warm if you are in the northern hemisphere, and if you're in the southern hemisphere, enjoy your summer. And today I have the distinct pleasure and the honor to have with me Gal Borenstein, and Gal joined me from McLean, Virginia. Did I get that correct, Gal?
Yes, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. Gal, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
I really appreciate your time with me this morning. And the objective of today's conversation is to get to know Gal a little bit and get to know what he does. Very interesting, though. The theme of our conversation today would be what executives should actually understand about digital trust in the AI area. The underlying tension is the AI scales, speeds, and reach, and trust collapses faster than ever when you have distributed technology in everybody's hands. You got to put guardrails around all this. Most leadership teams are still managing trust like in 2015. Believe it or not, I've had those conversations. I know exactly what some of the leaders are doing, and they're not really evolving with time where we are right now in the digital age that we're in right now. And just for people to get a context of this, most of these conversations in the past used to happen in sort of like you put them in a state where they are right now. I had a conversation about this in January 2025, and I'll revisit that in next year, January 2025. Unfortunately or fortunately, where we are right now in the digital age that we're living in right now, this conversation needs to be revisited. If it's not on a monthly basis, it's almost on a daily basis. You need to revisit this conversation. Things are evolving really fast. Gal, let's get to know you first. The first question everybody gets on the channel, the story question. So what's your story? What got you here?
Well, the short version of it, of my narrative, life narrative, is that after I kind of graduated with a techno MBA that involved learning business and telecommunications. But at my core, I was a writer, and that was kind of my lane. There was a big recession, which was in 1991.
I remember that one.
And the only job I could get with all the 2 degrees, advanced degrees, was the job as a marketing assistant for $28,000 for a $20 million technology company that was specialized in telecom systems and IVR, which at the time was interactive voice response, computer telephony. And really what I took from that experience was that agencies were not treating small companies the way they should be treated. And in fact, technology was always kind of a weird child in advertising, unless you were selling a consumer product. So I took that experience and I said, well, if there are 50 or 100 companies around the area or over the East Coast that really are having the same issue, to have a very small marketing department or no marketing department, and how can they basically afford it? So I basically literally took the idea and tested it with an introduction that was made for me by a kind of a networking person in a country club. And I met the CEO of a financial management system, and he says, well, Gal, the issue is not that we don't want marketing and PR and branding. The issue is that we can afford it. And even if we could afford it, we don't know what would good look like and what bad would look like. So I asked them, what are you paying your receptionist? And they said $28,000 a year. We're talking about the 90s. And I said, well, what if for that price you get PR and marketing communications and brand strategy to the degree that you're doing advertising, because most of it applies to B2B when it comes to technology. And that basically led to the establishment of the Borenstein Group, my agency, which is now 35 years old, celebrated in October. And the most important part, our focus has always been on working with engineering-based companies, whereby we have very, very smart clients that can invent things that you can't even imagine. But most of the time, because they think technology, they are not necessarily focused on how to communicate it to the outside world. So the job of marketing, branding, and PR really is to be able to connect the dots and ask the question, so what? Let's say it's faster. Let's say it's cheaper. Let's say it's running multi-process in parallel. it really doesn't matter if your customers don't understand it, or most importantly, you created a solution in search of a problem. And the third is, how do we basically take a new technology and position it in the marketplace so it produces high margin? And there's an old saying where it's basically explains it. Where there's mystery, there is margin. Where there's mystery, there's margin means
Love
that,
that one. Where's mystery, there's margin.
think about computers. A PC basically cost $2,000 and $3,000 in the 90s. And then people figured out that they can buy the parts and put it together, and now it dropped to $500 if you wanted to build your own computer, or cheaper.
That's right.
And that's really kind of what keeps technology going. So it doesn't matter if it's cybersecurity, advanced analytics, secure networking, or management consulting, financial management consulting. Everybody shares the same issue, which is, number one, how do you become a safe choice, an innovative choice, and a trusted choice? The second is, how do you communicate your technology or your complex ideas in a way that kind of makes sense? And the third is, how do you basically create a mystery factor that allows you to charge premium for whatever it is you're doing? And if you do those three things, you really have a really good chance in being successful. So the agency, it's really focused on these things. And I'm very fortunate to have worked with, and still do, many CEOs. And out of that experience of working with CEOs, about a year ago, I basically woke up one morning and I said, everything that we do is around trust. Trust is fungible in many places and is not really integrated into things. And then came the digital divide between people, and AI showed up. And that's really kind of where the idea was implemented in the form of a book for leaders in companies. And it's called Don't Believe the Hype, When Trust is on the Line in the Age of Digital and AI.
You know, I've gone through the books that you've written. Not just one, I guess. You've done a few.
Well, you can see that shelf.
Yeah, no, you have them listed on your LinkedIn too. So I really appreciated the research I did. You made my job a lot easier. When sometimes some of the guests, they come online and they don't have a lot of things going on in the public domain, and I have to do a deep search. And for you, it was pretty easy. Everything is out there. I was able to gather a bunch of information before our call, which is, thank you so much for making it a little bit easier.
Well, actually, that's what I tell prospects that come to us, and they look at different agencies and they say, well, how did you find us? They say, sometimes Google. They said, well, how did you find the other one? Well, we found them after an hour later on page 4 of Google. And I basically say, well, would you want a marketing company that can't promote itself?
That's right.
Your marketing company. So it's a little giggle.
What you preach, right?
Yeah. But now with GEO coming to play, and generative search is going to be the standard as opposed to the old kind of Google pay-per-click or text messages, that's even more important. And that's what we're working on right now, to make sure that we're not irrelevant because we lost the position we had on page 1.
You know, we did a podcast. I did a podcast. What is it? Like 3 podcasts earlier with Leah Ruki, I guess her last name, from an agency called Brandy AI. It's in your area. It's in around Virginia area or Washington area, I think she told me. And we talked about geo quite a bit. And this is where things are morphing to right now. You brought up SEO, but everybody's still doing some SEO because Google still have some of the market on the search side. But geo is climbing pretty quickly. What's your opinion on that?
I think geo is a capitalist idea, which is Google used to be, and still is, 99% of business traffic when you think about anything. Over the past 5 to 10 years, they really added the ability to shop. And now basically the question on what's the next generation of a search engine when you have AI. And the first part of the answer was, let's bring AI and make the searches better by feeding them more information from more places faster, which is what AI can do, but it's based on information that exists. But the other part is purely capitalistic and very smart idea, which is if you're going to do that and provide more information, you can also plug ads throughout the search. And instead of having only top 3 as ads or sponsored content, now you can have that sponsored content in any search that you're doing. And of course, that means that when AI does its thing and it's really fast, Google is giving you so much information that you're likely to have more trust in what they have, even the sponsored content, because it's not kind of jumbled up with like 20 or 50 other situations.
Gal, from your side, for those who are listening to us right now, we got a lot of CEOs and founders and owners of companies. They listen to this podcast. How do you define digital trust the way a CEO or board member should understand it? Not from not the marketing version, like the true digital trust language a CEO will understand it.
I think the most strategic way to kind of think about it is you have a brand and you have a promise and you have a narrative that you're taking to market. When you introduce and integrate AI, you're taking basically a very smart copier machine, but you're not basically taking in and integrating it with your culture, with your audience. And most of the time, you let the technology and the automation take over what needs to be a human-centric experience, that it's based on trust that goes into, for example, data integrity, collaboration, transparency with your customers, and governance, to know that you're not putting out stuff that is incredibly either offensive or doesn't react in a good way. And that's really kind of the breakdown. And if I may, a really good example that happened in the past year, and I won't mention the name of the fast food giant restaurant chain that actually had that experience, but they basically experimenting with a voice AI that will come at your kind of pickup window, if you will. And guess what happened? People started inventing stuff and ordering a piano instead of a taco. And then people made it into a joke. And guess what? AI basically learned it and force multiplied it in 1,000 different places. So imagine a fast food restaurant trying to do the right thing and get smarter and faster service to its customers, but instead becoming the butt of jokes of everyone that is buying the fast food, simply because no one sat and emulated what can happen. No one planned for it. And yeah, you can blame marketing, but it's not marketing. There are the people that inside that are in charge and should be in charge of what's the impact going to be? How do we pilot those things before we take them to market? And for a CEO, your reputation is on the line. And when something like that happens, people aren't going to point the fingers at you. So you better pay attention.
You know, we talk a lot about adoption and the fast pace that people are adopting these new technologies before we put guardrails around it, because there's a mad rush, in my opinion, to create a cost savings. In one report I saw yesterday suggesting there are about 600,000 jobs to be lost in 2026, still to come, resulting of the mad rush or adoption of AI. And there are two tracks here, and I don't know if you agree with that, Gal. I love your comments on this one. Is that one track is saying we want to achieve those results really quickly, so our financial statement, our stock price can go up, etc. And the other one is saying, well, hang on a second now. We need to, yes, there are benefits for those technologies, but we need to evaluate where they fit, install them correctly, deploy them correctly. You gave an example earlier, but there's thousands of examples of people coming in, deploying these technologies to no results. I mean, Gartner put a report out, how many wasted investment on AI that people did not really get the benefit out of it. What's your comments on that?
Well, absolutely. And I think we can kind of divide it into two factors or form factors, if you will. The first is we're living in the FOMO stage of technology. Every time there's a new technology, every CEO, and especially publicly traded companies, but also privately held companies that have PE backing, they're looking for something that we all call the shiny object. And the shiny object basically is maybe 1% of your business, but it looks like it's 99% of your business. Mm-hmm. And that positions you as kind of an innovator or ahead of your competitors. The issue is that it doesn't parlay itself into the use of AI if you haven't taken the time to really kind of humanize it and create a system of digital trust that involves all departments. And that really has to do with how do you take the idea of we got to go there first without asking the right questions. without involving the right stakeholders in the organization. And most importantly, ask the right questions, because the reality is, even when AI is at its best, is basically spitting facts, and you can build the AI agents and you can localize it, as the name of your podcast and your focus. You can localize things as much as you want. But at the end of the day, the people that you just let go are probably the people that you're going to have to hire back, almost like the government shutdown here in the US. They fired
Oh
a
yeah,
lot of people through
yeah.
Doge. And then the reality was suddenly they had to work without institutional knowledge. And when that institutional knowledge was gone,
You hit the nail on the head. That institutional
yeah,
knowledge, right?
I hired them back.
Institutional knowledge is happening everywhere, and you're seeing company get rid because they want to realize like it's everybody's under the gun, right? What have you done for me lately? Every CEO is looking into that, and they want to see like immediate results right now because you take the banks in any country, really, they have a formula. And I was talking to several executives. They have a formula like every dollar saves, they can tie it directly to a stock price increase. Like there is a mathematical formula in the books. I don't know what it's too complex. I can't explain it, but every dollar you save as an institution, it inch your stock price upward pretty quickly. So that mad rush to achieve and make sure that the shareholders are satisfied and happy with their return on investment. They are specifically on a PE firm. You mentioned PE firms. They've got a different objectives altogether. Hold a company for 5 years and sell it immediately right after that. Get out of Dodge by achieving a little bit of value. And then, AIs, this conversation is happening everywhere where you come in, you put new technology into a company and hopefully get your return on investment and get out in 4 years, 5 years from your investment. The intellectual property these individuals they hold and were letting go, it will never come back. And if you are going to fix it, and I hear people now using synthetic data, I don't know. I mean, I've heard of synthetic data for past 2 3 years now. I've got a bunch of questions around synthetic data versus the knowledge that you would have with an individual who done the job for 20, 30 years. What are you going to do with it? How is that going to work?
Yeah. And I think the short answer is what most companies are missing is, because of the FOMO factor and because their board and investors and Wall Street are looking to show that they're advanced and they are AI enabled or AI formed or AI driven. There's all these marketing words that all represent basically you have a higher valuation because you integrated AI. But the end of the day and the beginning of the day, improving AI or making AI work for you and not the other way around has everything to do with cognitive behavior and emulating the way a person thinks and feels. And that's the two things that AI is not capable of doing. Even in 5 years, and it'll be interesting for me to kind of watch the podcast and see, was I foolish or was I on point? But at this point, with all the kind of effort to create personas, buyer personas, and all these different things, you still need to have a human heart, a human brain with knowledge that basically takes the information and make it useful for other people. If you're talking about a straight shot, like, we can send 1,000,000 emails instead of 100, that's kind of easy because you have KPIs that show that you save that much money on postage, for example, or allowing Salesforce to have more leads coming into its system. But again, what is really happening is it's quite the opposite. You implement the Salesforce or the CRM, but you never ask the right questions about your customers. You just created a buyer persona. And that buyer persona is based on data that you got out of AI and asking 3 questions instead of asking 20 questions, and less relying on AI and feed AI what it needs to do what a very skilled person in your company does. So it's not about creating a new kind of personality to work with. It's about taking the people that you have and people that you can now hire because they got fired somewhere else and bring them in because they're experts in what they do. Will it be speedier? Yes. Will it have some economies of scale? Yes. But without the strategic knowledge of the human beings, AI is basically a waste or wasting away the time of brands and the brands that are connected to the CEO and to the leader. And the result is you don't want your company to be a laughing stock because you did something that was good for the company decision-wise, but you never thought about the consequences. And the consequences brought you to where you are today, which is a bad reputation instead of a resilient brand in an age where you have fake reviews. You have all these things basically that you don't control anymore. So you really kind of have to integrate it.
100%. And I was just on a call earlier I'm on the board with the Canadian Language Industry Association, and I'm the past president of that association as well. And we were talking about where AI fits and where human fits, specifically on when it comes to translators, right? That's the world we live in. Marketers, everybody gets impacted in the same direction because that's a general problem. That's not a profession problem. Where a human needs to be driving the bus on all these technologies that they're coming. And as soon as we lose sense of that, it's a balance, isn't it, Gal, where how much you automate and how you automate and who's in control of that automation. And we talk a lot on this channel about ethical deployment of AI. That's a completely different discussion. I mean, we can dedicate an entire podcast on this one. Is AI being trained to be ethically responsible for the people that they are going to be using it down the road? Is it giving us unbiased opinions? Is it reasoning the way it's supposed to reason for the individual who's using it? It's not the AI can work or doesn't work. It's you decide how you want it to work. It has to serve the individual using it versus us serving right now the technology. There was an article it was published on CNN. They compare the translators as they're digging their own grave now, basically training the AI so AI can replace them down the road. And their employers are saying, please train AI, please train the machine on how to do better. We're all in that same situation, isn't it?
Yes. And again, the examples that you mentioned are just on point because that is the biggest mistake that industry is making, because the assumption is that AI will make us better, will give us better thoughts, new ideas. And there's no question that there are areas like robotics and intelligence and kind of statistics and things of that nature could basically become something great. If I may, can I just recut it? Okay.
That's fine. That's okay.
So what you just mentioned about how and where AIs could impact a company and making the company competitive, it really is about making sure that the human is running the ship and not the what we call the inmates running the asylum, if you will. And AI is the people that are running the asylum right now with all these AI agents. And when somebody emails you, which I get every day, at least 5 companies that decided that because we're in marketing and branding and image of reputation management of companies, that the AI agent that they offer for reputation management is going to make our life better. But they literally have typos in their email. And worse, in one case study, which happens every day, is one of those 5 emails that I get says, "Dear Mr. Blank." It actually misses the field. Now, imagine that used to be the problem of a one person, one salesperson, or one engineer, or 100 engineers. Now, if you send it to 10,000 or 100,000 businesses, what do you think is your brand? What do you think is your trusted position in the marketplace? And do you really care enough to call and tell them, hey, you're wrong? I wanted to do it only to find out that when I respond, I become kind of a victim, like a telemarketing victim, the sucker list, if you will. And when I respond and say, can you correct that before we start a conversation? The answer is you're basically getting an answer from an AI.
And we talked a little bit about it on this channel as well, actually quite a bit, where the human sort of like sits in the back now, and you've got bots for everything. And that bot, just take an example, if somebody's looking for a job, right? So they go and they use a bot to develop their CV, and they use a bot to advise on which job they want to, potentially could apply for and all that stuff. I work with a recruiting agency that I'm their fractional CRO for them. That's my second job. It's based in Ireland, in Dublin. And, we talk a lot about this because you've got a candidate who's using a bot. You've got a recruiter who's using a bot to sanitize all that information, to distill all that information, to figure out which one do I respond to, which one is sort of like in the realm of possibility. And at the end of the day, the bot is not hiring a bot. The bot is going to end up recommending hiring a human. And we don't know anything other from the human yet. All we know is we have that image that was constructed and put forth. But is it real? Is it who the person is? We have no idea. But that's just the window now.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we all know if we kind of dabble a little bit, even with ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, doesn't matter. You can ask for a bunch of facts to be researched, and it comes back within a minute or two with 10 uh, factors that shows you information that was researched for a competitive market intelligence report, for example, about product in a different category. And you get those facts, and most people just take it, cut and paste it into their report. Great. I just saved 8 hours of research. But if you basically ask the machine, can you verify that the sources that you just recommended are real and 100% accurate? Very often, AI is going to tell you, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Would you mind if I correct this and give you the right references, because the other ones were invented to give you an answer? So it's almost human-like behavior to basically cheat or to basically create the wrong answers.
Mm-hmm.
People call it hallucinations, but I don't think it's hallucinations. I think it's the part
Mimicking
that
our
we have.
behavior, I think.
Yes, we want to please, right?
Yeah.
We want to make people happy. So you give them the wrong answer and you move on to the next thing, which could be detrimental if you're a manufacturer, if you're in the medical field, if you're in what we'll call a life-saving situation, but also in financial management. Imagine if the stock market produces reports about the economy and it's based on just AI that pulled the wrong facts, and because they don't have time, that's the information that they're using. I think that's a huge issue that it's going to show its face with every stock moving forward.
Yeah, it's creating a culture out there, and the culture of laziness, I call it. People don't take the time to write a good prompt anymore. It just, we're used to going for the convenience of things, right? You go to an Apple store, you get a phone, you turn it on, it's supposed to work. But here you have a technology that is very sophisticated that requires us to think of what we're asking that technology to deliver. And very few actually do that. Translate my email. It happens quite a bit in my business. Translate my email. What does that mean? Well, translate it to Korean. Okay, we'll translate to Korean. Do you want like business tone? Do you want? Nobody takes the time to even, depict what the outcome should look like exactly, because they just translate it. Oh, okay. Well, create a marketing plan. Oh, what do you mean create a marketing plan? Give me a little bit more guideline. Like, it doesn't work that way. And I love the book that you've written. Don't believe the hype, Gal. So who are you trying to address when you said don't believe the hype? Who is hype hurting, in your opinion?
Well, there are two types of hype that the book really addresses. The first is companies used to own the hype narrative, if you will, about whatever they were selling, products and services. And that really is gone by the wayside because we have social media, we have review sites, we have places that are kind of water coolers on a digital landscape that allows you to talk smack about a company. And if you don't pay attention to it, and you basically ignore it as kind of fodder for people that are living in their basement, which is not the case anymore, you're missing kind of part of what needs to be your social listening to the outside world, which could basically impact your employer branding and trying to recruit the right people. And the second is also to make sure that you're addressing defects in the product that nobody reported to you because the executives below you in a company decided that it's not important enough, or they don't want to make you angry today because you were angry already when you showed up to the place. The second one, which is really kind of the system or the framework that I developed to help leaders that read the book think about how they can create a trust ecosystem within their organization, knowing that accountability always starts at the top. But if you're not connecting and you don't have collaboration, transparency, and real kind of communication mechanisms to make sure that, for example, if it was a car maker, it's not just the CEO that needs to know what's going on before they communicate something. You need the operations manager and the COO and the CFO and every C-suite person to trust each other. And we all know that when it comes to any corporation, the idea that you love everybody that's sitting with you in the kind of a boardroom is not really the reality, unless you're in kind of unicorn type companies. The reality is it creates an environment where you're incentivized to lie or incentivized not to say anything most of the time that would hurt your position in the company. But what happens when the factory workers, if it's a mini car manufacturer, never been told about a defect or never been asked, are you happy being here? And do you agree that these are the 5 priorities that we need to have to build a good company culture? And then when you do, are we implementing it on the outside, whether it's customer service, kind of agile project management, whatever it may be? So building kind of an ecosystem of trust within companies is basically all about asking the right questions and creating what I call a trust index within the company, where it starts with the CEO. Think about all the dashboards that already exist. Well, what if in certain attributes of a company, of a brand, you're at a 3 out of 10 based on the information that you collected internally? The point is not to say that you're going to be at 10 within a week, but put people in charge that can get that feedback from the different parts of the company, including human resources, employees and staffers that don't get paid well, but they're in the next generation of middle management, and make sure that at least you create transactional trust. So if you're not doing it for the kumbaya part or the culture of the company, you're at least able to use the tools and the benchmarks that you do. And again, you don't have to be from 0 to 10 at a 10. You could be starting at a 3 and get to an 8. And that's really what's missing right now in the digital age, because more and more we meet less in person. We have distributed workforces that only meet on video conferences or Zoom or meeting, and we lost the human touch. So the less we communicate in person, and we can kind of automate our communication to a point where we don't even text each other anymore because there's Slack that can allow you to, via the system, it creates a lot of questionable facts. And the people that are in charge of it are the people that basically are encouraging the failure to materialize, simply because without that human interaction and asking the tough questions, you're going nowhere.
When I hear that you talk about brand resiliency and you talk about the brand reputation internally inside of a company, I'm reminded of all employees probably use this statement before. It's called drinking the Kool-Aid. You gotta believe and tout the company, whatever culture, motto, product, whatever you're trying to push, and everybody needs to be on board with that. But there is 2 ways of doing this, and I think you've addressed it, Gal, by saying you can pretend to be part of the group and believe what the CEO is telling you, or you can genuinely be excited about the product, the service, what the company stands for, the reputation of the organization as well, because that fakiness, it goes away pretty quickly, and people normally they're just off, just leave, or they just don't believe in what you're trying to do as an organization. But the other part of it is, if you believe genuinely in what the company does, you develop a passion for that. You develop as an employee or as a team member, you develop extra energy to become an effective team member for the company and to produce better, to do better. The Kool-Aid part is just a lot of times I've seen it and I shake my head around it, and I'm thinking, I know you don't believe in that stuff. You're just saying what you're telling me to want me to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. And to give a positive example, Amazon, I always kind of use Amazon as a case study, an example of a company that started with selling books online that is keeping its core promises, many years later. Number one, you're going to get to see what other people are thinking about your product. If it's a book, if it's a piano, whatever it is that you're ordering, which is now anything, you can see what other people reviewed about your product, which creates a community of knowledge. Number two, if you order it, with the exception of heavy lifting items, you're going to get it within 24 to 48 hours unless there's a snowstorm. And number three, if you don't like it, you can return it for free. These are things that were looked upon at the time that Amazon started as just solving a logistics issue, which it was at the core. And if you ask Jeff Bezos, I think several times, he said, yeah, we're in the business of logistics. But he also said, when asked about branding, what is branding? And he said, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room, which is so poetically correct and on point. Because if Amazon broke one of its promises, that's what people would be talking about outside the room. And that becomes the breakdown of the resilience of your brand. Amazon is a very good example for anybody who's kind of finding a hard time to think about. Is they made 3 promises, and it doesn't matter what products they brought, and catalogs and side businesses that they've developed now, even Prime Video, all these different things can only happen where your brand is resilient, because everything else that you're doing has in the core belief within the company. Employees believe in it. They're judged by keeping the company values in place, and then also and making sure that their feedback is being heard. It might be subject to economic factors that nobody can control, but that is really kind of how a classic example of doing it right. So if you have 3 promises, do people believe in it internally and externally? Do all food groups, if you will, employees, prospects, reviewers, and manufacturers internally believe in it? If they don't, you got a problem. And now that problem will be automated when you go with the FOMO factor, and let's do AI as quickly as possible, because otherwise we'll be behind. AI can destroy the business because it will take away the 3, let's call it semi-religious principles that helped the company get to where it was.
Now, you talked a little bit about this one, brand resiliency. Like every company will have eventually, because you're in business, it's not a matter of an if, it's a when. You would have some sort of a trust issue, and that would cause the reputation or the brand to be a little bit shaken. What is your recommendation for those companies who are out there right now thinking the same way? And what should they do within the first, let's say, week, 72 hours? I don't know how you measure that. Short term or long term, let's put it this way.
Well, the Borenstein Group is many agencies that have PR as part of their services. We've gone in the standard of response from let's wait for 3 or 4 days, because it used to be a newspaper, like let's say the Washington Post or the New York Times, where something happened, there was a crisis, somebody wrote about it. And then the advice typically was one of 2: ignore it because in a week nobody will remember it. Or the second was be the first one to respond so you can shape the narrative of what it is that you're doing. But what automation has done in digital transformation, it basically created a new environment where if you don't really reply and create a crisis communication system that is heavy on the digital and know who the stakeholders, who are decision makers, who are influencers that can help you fix the narrative, if it's a kind of a perception of a mistake versus a criminal mistake, which is harder to fix, right? You're basically living in dark ages, because typically it's 2 to 4 hours. If you're not responding within 2 to 4 hours and you don't use those tools that I just mentioned in terms of having prepared responses, you are going to be a dinosaur very quickly and an easy target for your competitors. So I always basically tell people crisis communication is not responding to what happened. It's getting ahead of the story.
Now, are you aware that there are some executives right now that they're just faced with some tough conversation they're avoiding? And what would that look like?
Yes, many times, especially when companies have to go through downsizing. A week ago, for example, in time, just imaginary time for the example, a CEO and a CFO and a COO sat down and said, we didn't meet the numbers. We have to let go of, let's say, 200 employees. The traditional approach has been to have an email send and cut the card access to those 200 or 2,000 or 20,000 employees, which basically created a new brand for you, which is you're not human, you don't care about the future. And most importantly, you didn't have the capacity to have an emotional IQ by which you tell them there might be an opportunity to come back. We might help you get placed in another company that has the same kind of talent that you have. And that's really not happening. More and more, we're seeing kind of a digital response, which again breaks down the trust that humans used to have. You know, if you were kind of a union worker, especially, or kind of working in an organized kind of labor environment, you had kind of protection of a kind from your leadership. But when you think about factory workers and replace factory workers with government workers, with anyone, the time to tell people that there is trouble ahead is an all hands meeting, a town hall meeting that is happening a month before. Because if you're basically getting the data a week before you have to execute the firings of many, many talented employees, guess what? Somebody's not telling the truth within the company, and it's not a surprise. So working to help companies keep their brand resilient has to do with how do we basically respond in a way that takes into consideration that things go really fast. Sometimes you don't control what's going on, but how do you basically remain a human in an age of digital where the rumor mill is going to be extraordinary and hurt your brand because you didn't do the right thing? And the right thing would be that town hall, a communication that is not a taped video that goes to everybody in the company on a portal, having humans tell the situation and really kind of not make up a story, but say, hey, we screwed up, but here's what we're doing to fix it.
Now, let's get to know a little bit about your company or your agency, Gal. Talk to us a little bit about the agency, Borenstein Group. What does it do? How many employees you have? What kind of services? How can people reach out to you? How can they get in touch with you?
Well, the Borenstein Group, it really kind of is a specialist player in the sense that we focus on business to business and business to government. And what's unique about the groups of client sectors is that they basically have to sell something that costs millions of dollars or billions of dollars sometimes. And unlike in B2C, in consumer marketing, you can have a really cute idea. And since it costs less than $100, it's an impulse buy, which is based on, I laughed when I saw a commercial, for example. It's very different when it's B2B and B2G because in that environment, you have a decision maker, but the decision maker is not the only person that's making the decision. You have influencers and you have stakeholders. It could be the CFO, the CIO, the program director, who's the real customer, and anybody who's basically coming into the room to heckle. So what we specialize in is kind of breaking down those silos, creating the buyer personas based on interviews, seeing what the customers think about what they're selling, finding those gaps and making sure that they're addressed and creating the strategic communications and the branding and the PR that goes out. In terms of kind of the company itself, it has 20 employees that are now workforce distributed after COVID, when everybody decided to leave town because there are cheaper houses in different places. And with technology, you can overcome some of those gaps. But we still insist on having meetings daily where we're seeing who we're working with. And if somebody's mom is sick, we know about it. And we make sure that the human part comes to play. And being in the Washington, D.C. area, which is kind of where we focus on, allows us a privilege that not a lot of agencies have, which is to work with the smartest people that are developed, for example, military technology, with cybersecurity, the next robots that are going to be fighting, drones, all these different things that sound like science fiction. Every morning I wake up and the biggest joy that I get being in this business for so long is the fact that there's a new idea that we have to grapple with. And it's typically very complex and very hard to explain when we start. But at the end of the day, seeing that birth into something that is being used by somebody who's buying millions of dollars of that product or service, that is the joy that you get being in kind of storytelling and narratives and what we call integrated marketing communications, PR, branding, which now includes social media, because a press release is not a press release anymore. If you do a press release, you need to use the content on social media, on multiple formats, video, paper, emails, and that's really kind of the new age of digital.
From your side, you just reminded me, like a lot of times these engineering firms, they create these products and they're big complex. And to explain it to the outside world, you're right. An engineer is not a marketeer, and an engineer knows how to create a product. from your perspective is you take that product or whatever it happens to be, a technology, a service, etc., just distilling it for the audience, and you bring it to a format where it's consumable by whoever is going to be reading this or whoever is going to be listening to a piece of marketing that you've created or see it in a video, etc. You started the conversation by saying so what, by asking the so what. I'm assuming you ask a lot of so what to your customers.
Yes, and we're our own worst critics because that so what is after we came up with a story or a narrative that will help market it. But the so what kind of formula says that, so what if the CIO hears the same story? What if the CEO hears the same story? What if the buyer is not buying because we're not using their language that would endear themselves to our customer that is trying to basically sell something that requires being an innovation choice, a safe choice, and a best choice. And when you balance the scales to cap what we've been talking about a lot, is it's about creating trust. And that trust is manifests itself through those different elements that we discussed.
Now, I have still one more question on trust for you, because it sounds like a lot of my conversations tend to be around that, and we'll go into finish up the conversation here quickly. Has AI made it impossible to fake trust in the long term, in your opinion? You deal with trust quite a bit, but has AI made it impossible or?
No, it didn't make it impossible. It basically is kind of like the combination of self-selection and survival of the fittest. If you take those two things together, you will find that in our industry, communication industry, where you have agencies and design companies and people that design websites, it boils down to, is a human-centric person leading the operation? Or are we basically going to a site that says you can make your website in 2 minutes by importing your old website, which gives no thought or logic to what the individual customer and the target customer is looking for? Mm-hmm. So what we're saying is, if you take advantage of AI the right way, and you don't rush through it, but you actually find what it's good at and what it's not, which could be subjective to every company, and you don't homogenize it to a point where everybody's going to use the same agent, because that will never endear trust, if you will. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's basically the people that are succeeding. The people that are basically rushing into AI and spending a lot of money on things that don't have any backup in data that it actually worked, other than we saved a penny on something. That's really kind of the people that are going to go out of business or absorbed by innovators that say, hey, this company is a good company, but they have no idea what they're doing when it comes to recognizing that people buy from people, even when they buy products that have no heart. People buy from people.
100% people buy from people.
AI will never be, unless we change it to intelligence versus artificial intelligence.
That's right. That's right. There's a big gap there. Now, if last question, if you don't mind, Gal, some of our audience are listening right now, of a CEO listening to our conversation. What would you like them to take away from our dialogue today?
It's to really implement the name of my book, which is Don't Believe the Hype. The hype is internal within the company, where people don't tell you the full truth because you created a culture where saying nothing might be punishing or might be kind of oppressing you. And that goes across the executive management team and can touch your brand in very negative ways. And the second part is, people can say whatever they want now on the outside and give you really bad impression that your brand is not working. There are ways of verifying it, but if you don't listen and create social media listening, social proof of thought leadership that is a positive, and you take it to the marketplace, okay, you're creating the wrong hype, and your competitors are ready to pounce and take advantage of it. So going back to your question at the beginning of our podcast about GEO and how search engines are changing things. If you basically don't tend that kind of garden, if you will, of outside perception, you are basically going to see the first mentions of your company in a really negative way, which you could have totally avoided if you created content that is possible, digest, and is in the right places. So don't believe the hype means don't believe everything that people are telling you on the inside. And certainly don't believe all the negativity that is on the outside. it's on you as a CEO, as a leader of a company, to really start by building from within the ethos of the company, the cultural values that you want to instill, and bring to the fold the people that touch employees, that touch customers, and make sure that it's consistent, just the way I said Amazon is consistent with its three promises 20 years later.
No, I want to thank you, Gal, for joining me. I really appreciate your time. You know, we spoke for an hour. I got to admit, this is one of my longest podcasts I think I've done. Normally they finish around 45 minutes, but I'm enjoying this conversation because it brings a lot to light here. I'm sure the audience feels the same. There's a lot to be learned here. There's a lot of gems hidden in this conversation. So I want to thank you for coming in on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And if anyone is interested in buying the book, it's on Amazon along with several other books. And if you want to link into me, I want to offer all the listeners that feel that this is important. If you send me a message via LinkedIn after we're connected, I will offer the listeners of this podcast a complimentary copy of my book.
Absolutely. And we'll include that into the socials, like when I push them out. And I'll send you a message on LinkedIn anyway. So thanks for mentioning that. The audience would love to see that from you, and an additional book to read, essential additional book to read. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Thank you, Gal. I really appreciate it. Gal Borenstein, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate his time. I appreciate you listening in to this conversation. If you're coming in on YouTube, thanks so much for watching us. If you're coming in on the audio podcast, thanks for listening in. And I highly encourage you to subscribe to the blog post if you want the Cole's note of this particular conversation and any conversation that we had in the past. Subscribe to our blog site, robinayoub.blog, where I summarize these conversations into a consumable form. It's a 2-minute read. You can read it if you don't have the time to listen to the entire conversation. I highly encourage you to listen to the entire conversation. It's pretty beneficial for you. And for Gal and his team, thanks so much for being part of this conversation. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys at the next episode. Thanks, Gal.
Thank you for having me.